Just because someone apologizes and you forgive them does not mean that the relationship should automatically go back to square one or that the relationship should be restored at all. Let's dive in and break it down. Here at Quiet Courage, we're all about building biblical paradigms that help us navigate some of life's hardest questions. Today, we're talking about people who are consistently doing things over and over that are either wrong, maybe biblically sinful, or just that they are very hurtful emotionally, and that these people are consistently apologizing or acting like they're really sorry, and you're wanting to show them grace, you're wanting to show them compassion, you're wanting to show them kindness and forgiveness and the love of God. But what you might not be realizing is that by not holding them accountable and having realistic consequences for their behavior, they may be staying the same and actually abusing your kindness to keep the relationship centered on them, and abusing you, abusing the structures of forgiveness because consequences aren't part of the picture. There are some stories in the Bible that really help us to grasp a more holistic picture of what it looks like to forgive somebody while at the same time having a healthy dose of accountability and realistic expectations for the relationship. One of the most clear pictures of this is the story of Joseph and his brothers. If you're not familiar with the story, Joseph, that he was, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, I guess, he waking up, in the morning full of dreams and wonder and just excited about what he believed God wanted to do with his life. And he would share these things with his brothers, and his brothers were jealous and they hated him for his lack of tact and his what he thought God had in store for his life, that he said unashamedly. We can grow in tact in how we communicate ourselves, but still it didn't justify what they did to him. They threw him in a pit. When Joseph was away from his father and from those who had authority over the brothers, they were going to kill him, but instead they decided to throw him in a pit, sell him off into slavery, and pretend like he died. And so then Joseph was in prison, he was in slavery, all these different things happened to him, and for the sake of brevity for this story, is that Joseph, through a set of circumstances that God, who clearly had his eyes on Joseph and was taking care of Joseph, placed Joseph in a position of authority. And with the real sense of poetic irony, we have a famine in the land, and Joseph's brothers have to come to Joseph. They don't realize that he's the one in authority, they don't recognize him. But Joseph, here we are, full circle. Joseph has an opportunity to get him, but he doesn't do that. What he does is he actually tests the substance of their heart. Is already primed and ready to forgive them. How do I know that? I can't look inside Joseph's heart. But we see within the story is that the moment that Joseph recognizes that his brothers have had a real change of heart, immediately he drops the act. He's like, I'm your brother. They're like, what? No way. And he embraces them, weeping, celebrating, excited to be together with his family. Someone who has not forgiven cannot do that so quickly. But Joseph clearly had worked through his problems and forgave his brothers before he even saw them that time. But the point of the story is that Joseph did not immediately assume that it was his responsibility to look past all the ways that they had treated him. No, he kept all those things in mind. And he was thinking to himself, okay, am I going to open up the deepest place of my heart and connect with these brothers again? No, I'm not going to. I'm going to see what type of people they are. And that is exactly what he did. And once he saw that they were trustworthy, then he opened up his heart once again to connect with them. But we can still see mercy at play here, is that he didn't just immediately write them off. He didn't just immediately say, hey, I remember what you did to me, I'll never forgive you. He had a place in his heart ready to restore the relationship with them once again. Once they exhibited a type of behavior that was self-evident, that they had changed from the inside out. And you might be saying, well, James, that's an Old Testament story, like it's a little bit different, in the New Testament. Well, it's not, because even Jesus, when the rich young ruler came to him saying, what must I do to inherit the kingdom of heaven? Jesus wasn't like, oh, I just want to lavish mercy and grace and kindness and all my love upon you. That may have been his intention, because it says Jesus looked upon him and loved him. But Jesus did not just say, hey, just say this prayer, come follow me, and we'll act like everything's fine. No, he tested his heart. He said, go and sell all your things, because he knew that he loved money. When the young man walked away sorrowful because he had great possessions, Jesus did not run after him and say, hey, wait. Like, let me change your mind. Let me try, and I just really want you to be with me. He let him experience the consequences of his decisions. That's the only way that we really, truly begin to grow and develop and own the decisions that we make, is if we allow our consequences to be informative to us. So let's take this back full circle. Maybe there's somebody in your life who is consistently taking advantage of your kindness. If we look at the example of Joseph, if we look at the example of Jesus, it is not loving for us to allow people to continue to behave in a way that they are taking advantage of the kindness of others. In order for people to grow, they really have to be able to see that their behavior has real consequences. If somebody, it's always about them, that you never get in a word in edgewise, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just having a really hard time. Or if they're consistently taking advantage of your attention, of your affection, of your kindness, using your money, using your time, using your resources, being mean to you, berating you, cutting you down, making you feel like you're the one who has the problem all the time. We need to be looking at the fruits of the Spirit. They're self-evident: love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, and self-control. I may have missed one. Correct me if I'm wrong. But those things can be seen. If we're not producing those things, we need to be able to speak into each other's lives freely and be like, hey, I feel like you're not really holding yourself to that higher standard. And I'm not talking about, holding someone accountable after the first time. You take the log out of your eye first before you look to see the speck in your brother or sister's eye. You recognize that you have your own things that you're working through, but when someone is consistently doing something and then making an excuse, wrapping victim language around themselves, or over-spiritualizing, saying, well, the reason why I'm so angry all the time and I lash out at you is I'm just so passionate. Well, okay. Well, the Bible says that zeal without wisdom is unhealthy. So stop saying that you just got godly zeal, and let's get some wisdom then. Let's get balanced and actually be, honest with ourselves on where we're really at. And when somebody is not willing to be honest with themselves, there comes a point when you have to set up a boundary and bring consequences to this relationship and say, hey, I'm not going to let you use my money anymore. I think you need to get a job, and I can help you get one. I don't like it when you talk to me this way. I think it's disrespectful and it's unkind. It's not the way friends talk to each other. I feel uncomfortable the way you are consistently gossiping and talking bad about other people around me. These are just a few of these examples, but it's going to mean that the relationship dynamic will change. So you can forgive that person. You can say, I am not holding this. You don't have to come to me to earn any type of love from me. I release you and I put you in God's hands. Like, that's biblical forgiveness. But the relationship is restored based upon their behavior and whether they've shown themselves to be trustworthy. So if you're watching this video and you're wanting to live a life that's godly, that honors Jesus, and you're upset and deeply hurt and concerned, not for yourself, but for the well-being of your friend or friends or family, there's going to come a time when you're going to have to stand and bring some consequences to the relationship. That's a very strong word, but that's what love will do. Because we don't want people to continue to live in a way that's broken, where they're going to stay in a place where they can't really grow and take accountability for their actions and stop mooching off other people and manipulating and abusing people emotionally. That's not okay. It's essentially limiting the capacity by which God wants to move through you when you allow people to treat you in ways that God does not want you to be treated. You're not fighting for your rights or for you, like, I need to be loved by this person. It's no, this is not in line with God's created order. Relationships aren't meant to be this way. And if I want to be a follower of Jesus, I'm going to set some boundaries and I'm going to say, hey, let's not do this anymore. And you have to ask yourself, what do you want more? Do you want healthy relationships? Do you want people in your life who are going to push you closer to Jesus and build you up into his likeness? Or are you going to be an enabler who lets selfish people stay selfish, who lets manipulative people stay manipulative, who lets emotionally abusive people stay emotionally abusive, and just call yourself compassionate and loving when you're actually not? And then who you are meant to be isn't in its fullest degree. So let's live according to what I call the Joseph factor. Let's be people who are quick to forgive. Let's, take the log out of our eye before we look to take the speck out of somebody else's. Let's not just jump to things first off, but if someone is having a pattern, a habitual pattern of manipulation, of victimizing themselves, of emotional abuse, of verbal abuse, the loving thing to do is to set limits on that relationship. And to say, this is a healthy relationship and this is what I'm going for. And if this person says no, the best thing to do is to let that person go, because they need to learn. And you also need to have the freedom and the capacity to be exactly who God called you to be, and to surround yourself with people who are going to empower you to be that person. And when we do this, we will begin to surround ourselves with people who want to exemplify Jesus and also want you to be like that same person. And we can be that city on a hill where people who don't have the hope of Christ, who don't understand the gospel, can come into those communities and say, wow, this is what it looks like for people to really love one another, to honor one another, to build one another up, to hold one another accountable. I'm tired of being out in the world where there is no justice, where people just do whatever they want. They abuse one another, they use one another. This is different. So if we don't hold people accountable for their sin, when people come outside from the world and to the church, they're going to say, this is no different. Let's be different. Let's be the hands and feet of Jesus, and let's hold one another accountable with real consequences, because that's what love does, so that we can all grow. Thanks for stopping by Quiet Courage. May we grow in confidence and courage day by day. God bless.